Greetings from Boston. My name is Aaron Knapp. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, arguably the greatest vocalist that American vernacular music has ever produced, an inspiration to generations of people around the world, has died today at 76 years old of pancreatic cancer. Her family was close by her side in her dying days, but it's the world who will be mourning Aretha Franklin. She was an inspiration to so many, and again, and I stand on this proposition, arguably the greatest vocalist that American music has ever produced. This is such a tremendous loss for American music. But Aretha has a legacy. She has music to appreciate. She has a life that we should be remembering and appreciating and celebrating. And that's what I wanted to do today. So let's talk about the great Aretha Franklin's life. Let's listen to some of Aretha Franklin's music and enjoy some of the soulful musicality that she was able to produce. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about her legacy and her significance in American music history. Subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. This is American Music. Aretha Franklin was born in 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee. She was the daughter of a very well-known Baptist minister, Reverend C.L. Franklin, who apparently had a very good singing voice himself. He was known as the man with the golden voice. Well, Aretha's mother didn't ultimately play a large role in Aretha's life, and in fact left the family after they moved to Detroit. Well, by 14 years old, Aretha Franklin was already performing in what were called gospel caravans. She traveled around with her father and performed gospel music for people. John Hammond of Columbia Records discovered Aretha, calling her an untutored genius, and immediately signed her to Columbia. There's some controversy over these Columbia years, which are roughly from 1961 to 1966. A lot of the music really doesn't sound like the Aretha Franklin we know. She wanted to cross over, it seems, and it seems like her producers really wanted her to kind of be another Nat King Cole in that sort of tradition, a real crossover artist, whereas I think Aretha had those roots in the gospel and it just wasn't quite satisfying her. Of course, she loved a lot of the classic American music as well, but to get a taste of the kind of music she was recording for Columbia, we can listen to one of her first hits called Rockabye, Your Baby with a Dixie Melody. It's kind of a jazzy piano. It's reminiscent of the jazz and swing era, to be honest.
Rockabye, your baby with a Dixie melody. When you croon,
it's Aretha.
croon a tune from the heart of Dixie, and just take my cradle.
The basic pieces are there, but the song selection was not great for her, or not so suited to her, I think, best talents, her best side. So what happened was ultimately that Atlantic's Jerry Wexler was able to buy Franklin out of the Columbia contract, which involved buying her out of $80,000 in debt that she had to Columbia at the time. Well, Wexler saw the talent and knew that Aretha could be part of this growing soul music movement that included, of course, Ray Charles, James Brown, and so many others. Well, Wexler took Aretha Franklin down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and was able to get some recordings that attracted a lot of interest. And this is when Aretha Franklin really came into her own. From 1967 to 1969, Aretha Franklin had her golden period. And we can go over some of the classic songs that ended up in this bunch. Of course, we have Respect. Now, Respect is such a classic song for a number of reasons, but let's listen to it to just appreciate its genius. You got that Muscle Shoals sound. The horn section. Now, this cry for respect, I think, functioned on a number of levels. I think 3 levels. On the one hand, it was a function of the narrative function in the song, which is kind of a love song, or it has something to do with a relationship. The singer is saying, give me some respect. But it worked on at least 2 other levels. First, the level of women's liberation, which was happening in the 60s, but also civil rights. And the civil rights movement really took this song on as an anthem. It's funky beyond belief. And of course, the background vocals, the call and response, was something that Aretha, she didn't invent it, but it was something she brought into pop music from the gospel genre, and she did it very effectively. And then, of course, think about what you're trying to do to me. Which, by the way, was co-written by Aretha Franklin. Again, you got those wonderful syncopated backups. She was a writer. She wrote a lot of her songs. She did perform a lot of other people's songs as well. It's such a classic song, and she also did some ballads. We can listen to a couple of other things, but this cry of freedom, it held so much significance, folks. Her songs transcended the particular narrative context that they implicate. Her songs were a voice of the society, a voice of a race. Freedom is the call that really resonates in that song. Well, she also did a number of covers during this period and later that were great. Let It Be was a very gospel-flavored Beatles song that she did, which I think was very appropriate.
I find myself in times of trouble. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be.
Remember, Billy Preston, who was a gospel organist and keyboardist, was in the Let It Be sessions. She is going to be missed. It's such a tremendous loss for American music, folks. She was really a miraculous singer, a chosen one in a way for a whole generation, for a whole time period of American music. It almost brings tears to my eyes listening to this music, but I can tell you one thing. In this period from 67 to 69, Aretha created some of the greatest music that, again, American pop music has ever known. There were many more hits. There were many albums that cohered together as albums. She was one of the first black soul artists to be putting together albums of material that cohered together. The Motown folks had been really sticking with the singles format for a long time, but Aretha did find a way, along with Ray Charles, along with Stevie Wonder, a way to bring these sort of mini concept records together, or at least records that had a real coherence in the music. I think these years from 67 to 69 were really her golden years. Of course, there were highlights in the 70s. Amazing Grace was a album that she did that was quite good, that she returned to her gospel roots on. She had a cameo appearance in the Blues Brother movie. Of course, she had the hit in the 80s, Freeway of Love, and the album that was on did very well and was certified, I think, multi-platinum. She sang at the Obama inauguration, and I think she really was culturally a big part of the Obama movement and the Obama moment in 2008. Certainly the Obamas really love Aretha Franklin. I recall President Obama, in fact, crying listening to Aretha perform on stage at the White House. She was the queen of soul, folks. Soul sort of died out as a genre in the early 70s, but it reared its head in some very interesting ways, including hip-hop ultimately, because, a lot of the early rap artists were sampling the soul beats, and that constituted a very large part of the music that they used to create the early hip-hop. Well, Aretha was the queen of soul, and the rappers were using her songs and her rhythms. But she, again, I think, beyond soul music, beyond hip-hop, beyond black music, she transcends race. She transcends even America. She really is the greatest vocalist we have ever produced in this country. The loss is tremendous, but her influence lives on, folks. Think about this. Could Mariah Carey have ever existed without Aretha Franklin? No way. Could Whitney Houston ever have existed? And these are some of the biggest selling recording artists of the 80s and 90s. But the real, I think, pertinent example is Kelly Clarkson. Now, Kelly Clarkson, I think, is one of our finest singers. Clarkson, of course, came out of American Idol. I believe it was the first season, and interestingly, I don't think American Idol has produced anything as good as Clarkson, but she was auditioning with Aretha Franklin songs. And for the generation of people that know Kelly Clarkson, they might not know how much Aretha influenced Clarkson, but by the little pieces that I've showed you of some Aretha songs, you can go and listen to some more Aretha. You will hear, if you love Kelly Clarkson, go listen to Aretha Franklin. I'm saying that neither is a better singer necessarily, although I think I do have a preference for Aretha, but they're both great, but the most important point is that they're very related. Much of what makes Kelly Clarkson great comes from the influence of Aretha Franklin. So it's a time to celebrate Aretha's life. I hope you've enjoyed this little talk about Aretha Franklin. May she rest in peace. Thank you, Aretha, for giving us fantastic music, fantastic feel-good music. Thank you for all the happiness you've created. Bye-bye for now.